So it's May 17th, 2013 as I'm filming this, and Nintendo held a Nintendo Direct today. And it's obviously going to be their last Nintendo Direct until their E3 schedule starts up next month with, whatever announcements and presentations they plan to have. And I don't know, I guess some people out there were expecting like a big blowout Nintendo Direct with a bunch of Megaton announcements, which is a very silly thing to think at this point because there's no reason to think that. And being said that it was a smaller Nintendo Direct, they did have some pretty good announcements. One of the most surprising to me was that new Super Luigi U is going to be available as a standalone retail boxed title, which is not something I expected considering that we've known about this game for nearly half a year now, and we've basically known of it as as DLC for New Super Mario Bros. U. And I wouldn't be surprised if literally the only reason they're coming out with a boxed version of New Super Luigi U that doesn't need a copy of New Super Mario Bros. U to run off of is basically just to psychologically establish that New Super Luigi U is actually a new game and not just like a second quest or something or just like a new game plus sort of thing for New Super Mario Brothers U. And I really wouldn't be surprised if that's the only reason they're coming out with this as a box game because I've seen a lot of things, a lot of comments over the months saying, with the impression that New Super Luigi U was literally New Super Mario Brothers U with more enemies or not a new game, with a full set of new stages and Nintendo kind of had a similar thing with New Super Mario Brothers Wii, where I've run into people a couple of years after that game came out thinking that New Super Mario Brothers Wii was a console version of New Super Mario Brothers for the Nintendo DS and not an actual sequel. To get off of that, what other news was there? Basically, I think we had the partnership with Sega announced. I think depend the new Sonic being on Wii U is going to be a big deal. Those games do sell on other systems. The fans of Sonic will, if the game's going to be exclusive, I could easily see them springing for a Wii U if they weren't already leaning in that direction. And they might be, to a certain extent, a lot of the big Sonic fans might have already been in the market for Wii U anyway, or already owned or plan to own one, given that sort of Nintendo's sort of, to a certain extent, sort of been like the system that all the refugees from the Dreamcast, debacle sort of migrated to a certain extent, even though obviously Sega's had games on, all the systems since then, but the next few major console Sonic games being on Wii U exclusively, that's a pretty big deal. And another announcement they made about Sega was that there are going to be a lot of Game Gear games coming to the 3DS Virtual Console. The games I saw screenshots of included Sonic the Hedgehog 1, the 8-bit handheld version of Sonic 1, the 8-bit handheld version of Sonic 2. And I'm like, oh, finally, like those are the games that I really should have been on the 3DS Virtual Console from the beginning. I mean, if the 3DS Virtual Console was as robust as early on as the Wii's Virtual Console was, then really I think that that the 8-bit handheld version of Sonic the Hedgehog should have been there on day one, pretty much, for as soon as the Virtual Console service launched, but it wasn't. And I've been itching to play. I want to play. I have not played the 8-bit handheld version of Sonic the Hedgehog 1, which, mind you, is my first proper video game. I have not played that since on our actual Game Gear since the mid '90s. I really miss playing it. I would have happily paid for that. You know, so that's finally in the works. I can only imagine why they waited so long. The 3DS Virtual Console in general, there needs to be a lot more stuff on it. I see no reason why they're not Super Nintendo games on it. Why they're not more NES games on it. Uh, really, basically anything like N64, I can imagine there being controller compatibility issues just with the button layout of the system. But anything through Game Boy Advance and earlier should probably be on the as far as 2D games, this should probably be up on the 3DS Virtual Console. And it's not like they can't run a 3D Game Boy Advance emulators on the 3DS. They have them for the Nintendo Ambassador games, but they didn't properly emulate it, and the sleep function doesn't work, which really ruins the portability to me of a lot of those Game Boy Advance games. They need to make a proper 3DS Virtual Console service, have some game for Game Boy Advance, have some games up there, even if they don't put up the games like Metroid Fusion or whatever that were Ambassador exclusive. Have the games up there. I'd be buying a lot more games if the games were available on the 3DS Virtual Console. And they did not talk about 3DS much, which is good because we need to use Wonderful 101. Shokio talked all about it, how this is supposed to be a launch game, then it was a launch window, and now it's like hopefully it'd seem like it would be summer sometime, but September, it's like gosh. Hopefully that delay will hopefully coincide. What I read somewhere, I don't know where I read this. I read this a couple of places that behind the scenes Nintendo's sort of planning a renaissance for Wii U starting in late summer. Once that second update is up that increases the speed fully and adds all those features, all the features Nintendo wants, and they have a good selection of games going, Nintendo's sort of going to start a revised marketing blitz for Wii U, sort of reshaping the system's image. And Sony had to go through this with PlayStation 3. It was never, PlayStation 3, it sold, but it was not like the juggernaut, PS2 like juggernaut that everyone assumed it would be. And a couple of years into its lifespan, Sony had to, step back and make a new image and a new reputation for their system. They had to, redesign the hardware. They had to make a new logo for it, and that's those sort of things. And it worked, So they really sort of redeemed the brand of the system. It was really wasn't taken that seriously for a period of time early on in its lifespan. But they got their act together, and it went on to have a good reputation and a good run. PlayStation 3. So Nintendo's basically trying to rebrand, well, not rebrand, but just kickstart the Wii U's momentum. Coming this fall, hopefully, Wonderful 101 could be part of that, and then the other things that are coming out for Wii U. And really, I think the biggest news, besides from what I've mentioned, that I'd like to talk about is the Reggie made an appearance at the end of the video, in which he came out and announced a partnership with Best Buy that certain Wii U E3 demos are going to be playable in store at Best Buy, and that's pretty big news. And the reason, and this year, and only this year really, is going to be particularly big news from the standpoint that a lot of the big stuff that Sony's going to be showing, a lot of the big stuff that Microsoft's going to be showing for their 8th generation PlayStation and their 8th generation Xbox are not going to, they can't even have downloadable demos that, or that people could download for their systems because the systems don't exist yet. They're not in people's homes yet. And it's really not feasible to get these PS4 and new Xbox units out to public to play them, during the week of E3. Whereas Nintendo, their new system's already here. It's already in people's homes. You could play it now. You could buy it now. And they could have, special Wii U's set up at Best Buy where they could actually get these games in the hands of people and they could try them right then and there. I hope to see in this, I hope to see like a sizzle reel. What I'm assuming Nintendo's going to be doing is they're going to have maybe a Super Nintendo Direct for Wii U and a Super Nintendo Direct for 3DS. And I think I'm expecting, sort of based on what I've read, that to sort of be their scheme for E3 as far as outreach, a big sort of presentation for people to focus on. Not a big staged event, but a supersized Nintendo Direct and a supersized for Wii U and a supersized Nintendo Direct for 3DS. Now, if they have specific clips like the trailers and the announcements and stuff, if they could cut that down, which they could do a lot easier with a Nintendo Direct than with a live stage show that they didn't have to cut down, because everything's choreographed more precisely. Everything is, it's filmed in a studio. They could have multiple takes. That's another thing, advantage to if doing it through online and not having a big stage show. they could edit out gaps. They could do as many takes until they get everything perfect, make sure their message is on point, make sure there are no technical errors like with the reveal of Zelda Skyward Sword, and they could cut that down, make something that you could get the gist of what Nintendo's talking about, what their message is for E3 for Wii U in maybe 5 minutes. Have a big video screen of that playing on a loop in Best Buy, and then right there have 3 or 4 specially set up, Wii U stations where you could play the games that they're talking about right there on screen. And then, because of the cool thing about it being in Best Buy, is that if they really, impress someone like, wow, this is a system I'll be into, they could buy the system right then and there with the prospect of playing these games and eventually. So with the announcement of this Best Buy partnership, Nintendo's strategy for E3, it's maybe making a bit more sense now. And one thing I know Nintendo probably had their eye on was the fact that during the Nintendo Direct, they got a lot of stuff trending on Twitter for most of the actual 30-minute broadcast, and as well as for about a half hour after the end of the broadcast. What was trending? Nintendo Direct was trending. Nintendo Direct NA from North America was trending. New Super Luigi U was trending. And mind you, New Super Luigi U, it's not that big of a game. Like, I'll be surprised if... that's not a particular title I imagine selling a lot of systems. And that got trending. And what else was trending? Yes, Pikmin 3 was trending. And... well, something else was trending too. Was Wonderful 101 trending? I don't remember. But Nintendo got the Wii U was trending as well. And unfortunately, the first thing when you clicked on the Wii U trending thing was the thing about EA, not making any more games for Wii U. And that I made a whole other video about that. But they got, Wii U, New Super Luigi U. They got a lot of the titles they were talking about trending for a good hour. So if Nintendo does a supersized Nintendo Direct, and what they ought to do, Nintendo for the hour, during their broadcast, they have to have, get a promotion or make sure that when you click on the trending thing, when it trends, that a link is right there to the video, so people that are just out in the wild on Twitter see, oh, Mario's trending, what's going on? And click, Super Mario, and then they see, Super Mario Robin, new for Wii U is, or whatever. And, they see the presentation going on right there. That'll, I was skeptical, and I still am somewhat skeptical of their approach for E3. But I got some people upset at me saying, "Oh, H, you're how dare you doubt Nintendo?" I got some messages I'm gonna sit down with you right now and tell you why you're wrong about what you said about Nintendo's E3 strategy, and I'm like, okay, guys. Some people seem to think I'm oh, I don't like it. I don't know, just got pissed because I expressed doubt or uncertainty as to their strategy for E3 2013. I mean, Shokyo said it himself, and I hadn't watched his videos at the time I made mine, but basically is hey, Nintendo, convince me. I want to be wrong. Show me why I'm wrong, and your approach for E3 is going to, send, Wii U to the next level. I want Nintendo to succeed. And the thing is, I know Nintendo knows what they're going to have to show at E3. They know how they're going to present it. I don't. I'm not saying I know more than Nintendo in that regard. I've never planned an E3 schedule before. And, Nintendo, knows what they're doing in that respect. Now, I'm still concerned that they could possibly, this new take could set them up to be overlooked when, Sony reveals the PlayStation 4 hardware, Microsoft reveals their new home console, and I think this puts them in more peril of being overlooked. But if Nintendo, takes this more sort of consumer level approach, seemingly even directing their attention more at, gamers out in the wild, gamers who are hardcore enough to own a home system, yet aren't hardcore enough to, watch, all the E3 presentations live on the internet and on TV, because the people who are hardcore enough to watch the presentations live and tweet about them live, they're only, I'm sure, a fraction of the people who are actually going to, the millions and millions who are actually going to be buying these systems and forming the bulk of their install base. And if Nintendo can successfully get their attention during E3 and go after them with, in-store demos in Best Buy, and by leveraging, the publicity on Twitter as these announcements are made, and making their E3 presentation very accessible, so someone could get the gist of what Nintendo's message is in maybe 10 minutes, 5 minutes even. I'm sure they're going to have things that are made in little small segments, and they're going to have sort of bigger ones for people who are more interested. If they could express the gist of what they have in 10 minutes instead of hoping that they'll watch for an hour long on stage live presentation, then I think Nintendo's E3 strategy is going to work for them. Let's see how it turns out. I hope it works awesome for them. But I know, the tradition of having the big, on stage live presentation, I'm going to miss it. But hopefully, what Nintendo has in store is going to be even better than that. And this whole E3, this whole Nintendo Direct today was basically setting themselves up for E3 2013. And I have a hard boiled egg that I'm going to eat right now. So thank you very much for watching.